Under the punishing 113-degree Fahrenheit heat of a Miami afternoon, the manager of Norway did not look down at the grass. Stale Solbakken tilted his head back and pointed desperately at the empty sky above the stadium. His eyes had just seen a football strike a thick steel camera cable suspended high above the pitch. His players had seen it. The entire stadium had seen the ball abruptly change direction. But the most expensive officiating technology in the history of sports looked at the exact same sky and officially concluded that everyone was hallucinating. Welcome to the modern era of sports governance. We are living in a time where the people in charge sell you the illusion of absolute control. They tell you that machines have removed all human error from the game. They promise that their data is pure, perfect, and unbiased. But what happens when that perfect machine tells you that a giant steel cable simply does not exist? We are going to examine the exact moment a billion-dollar system collapsed in on itself. You will see how a historic sporting dream was dismantled not by a superior opponent, but by a blind algorithm and the bureaucrats hiding behind it. By the time we finish, you will understand the terrifying reality of modern football administration. To truly comprehend why an entire nation feels like they were robbed in broad daylight, we have to look at what was actually on the line in that quarterfinal match. The team of Norway was writing the exact kind of story this tournament was built to showcase. They were surviving the brutal, suffocating humidity of Florida. They were imposing their will on a global giant. In the 36th minute, Andreas Schelderup fired a gorgeous strike into the net to give them the lead. The impossible felt entirely real. They were 45 minutes away from the semifinals of a World Cup. They had the momentum, the belief, and the tactical advantage. And then Jude Bellingham happened. But the anger surrounding this match is not about Bellingham brilliantly finishing a pass from Anthony Gordon deep into first-half stoppage time. The controversy is strictly about what the ball did before it ever reached the penalty area. When goalkeeper Ørjan Nyland launched a heavy clearance up the field, the flight of the ball did something physically impossible. It stopped dead in the thin air. It dropped almost vertically toward the turf, landing awkwardly and setting up the sequence that broke the hearts of Norway. Nyland immediately pointed up at the robotic camera system hovering over the pitch. The ball had undeniably hit the cable. Under the official laws of the game, the directive for this exact scenario is crystal clear. If a ball strikes an outside object like a camera wire, play must be stopped immediately. The referee is required to restart with a dropped ball. There is no gray area to debate. If the ball hit that wire, the equalizing goal should never have counted. Solbakken marched straight to referee Clément Turpin to demand a basic level of awareness. He expected common sense and human judgment to prevail. Instead, he got a wall of digital denial from the highest authorities. The response from FIFA was incredibly fast and completely absolute. Their official statement declared that the connected microchip inside the match ball registered no spike in data. There was no heartbeat peak on their monitors while the ball was in the air. Therefore, the governing body ruled. There was no contact with any cable. The computer said no. And that was the end of the discussion. The goal stood. The momentum violently shifted. The dream of Norway began to bleed out on the field, all because a piece of technology refused to validate reality. This is the absolute danger of relying on silicon to govern human emotion and athletic endeavor. When a piece of code decides your fate, there is no arguing with it. You cannot ask a microchip to look at a video replay. You cannot appeal to the logic of a sensor. You can only sit there on the bench and watch your biggest historical moment evaporate because a tracking antenna failed to register a physical impact. The authorities expect you to trust their invisible data over the very real evidence playing out right in front of your face. They demand absolute obedience to the machine. But the true scandal is not just about a single missed call or a faulty sensor. It is about the horrifying inconsistency of the people running these machines. We need to examine how this exact same technology behaved in a different situation, because the sheer contradiction is going to make you furious. If you want to see the real evidence of this institutional failure and discover exactly how deep this chaos goes, do not look away. We are going deeper into the machine. We are living in an era where the governing body of world football preaches about the illusion of absolute control. They want you to believe their technology is completely flawless. They demand that you place your ultimate faith in their digital architecture. Just 1 week prior to the Miami quarterfinal, this exact same microchip technology made international headlines during a tense match involving Croatia. In that specific game, a goal was officially wiped out by the automated system. The official reason provided by the authorities was absolutely staggering. The sensor placed inside the match ball detected that the synthetic leather had grazed a single strand of hair belonging to a Croatian player. A human hair. Think about the microscopic level of sensitivity required to register that microscopic impact. The system proved beyond any doubt that it could feel something as light as a feather brushing against the surface of the ball. Yet, we are expected to believe that this ultra-sensitive masterpiece of engineering felt absolutely nothing when the ball supposedly smashed into a thick steel Skycam cable. How does a machine see a hair but entirely miss a massive structural wire? The contradiction is deeply baffling. It defies basic physics. It insults basic common sense. Think about the vast technological infrastructure required to make these decisions. The governing body insists that 16 separate tracking antennas installed beneath the stadium roof were completely active during the match. They claim the network was functioning perfectly. They argue that the broadcast camera footage does not even show the cable shaking. But the manager standing on the sideline saw the ball fall straight down from the sky right in front of his bench. Solbakken had to process a deeply unnatural physical event. Gravity simply does not work that way. A football launched off the heavy foot of a professional goalkeeper does not suddenly lose all forward momentum and drop like a stone unless it hits a solid object. The human eye is incredibly adept at tracking unnatural motion in the physical world. But the governing authorities demand that the human eye submit to their data logs. But the nightmare for Stale Solbakken was only just beginning, because if the cable incident was an isolated glitch, you could perhaps chalk it up to a bizarre technological blind spot. You could argue the antennas under the stadium roof simply failed to read that specific altitude over the pitch. But then you stack it next to what happened exactly 10 minutes into the second half. This is where the sheer hypocrisy of the system fully reveals itself. Norway won a corner kick. The ball was swung deep into the penalty area, and Torbjørn Hegem brilliantly turned it into the net. The stadium absolutely erupted. For a brief emotional moment, Norway had regained control of their historic destiny. The relief on the face of the manager was palpable. The team had fought their way back through sheer physical endurance in one of the most hostile climates imaginable. And then the silent voice of the video assistant referee crept into the earpiece of Clement Turpin. The stadium fell into that terrifying modern silence. The fans stood completely still, waiting for an official staring at a monitor miles away to decide their emotional reality. The system pulled the play all the way back to review the build-up. They reviewed the footage frame by agonizing frame. They found that Erling Haaland had pushed Elliot Anderson with both hands. The goal was officially disallowed. Look at the facts logically. Haaland did push Anderson. Under the strictest possible interpretation of the new laws regarding grappling at set pieces, you can technically justify canceling the goal. But the core problem is not the rule itself. The problem is the terrifying contrast in how the rule is actively applied. Let us break down the exact sequence of this technological failure. The system analyzed a chaotic corner kick. The system isolated a standard pushing offense. The system overturned a crucial goal. Alongside this forensic action, the system monitored a ball dropping out of the sky. The system ignored a massive physical deflection. The system completely refused to intervene. How does the same governing body justify this absurd double standard? One club owner watching the match noted the absurdity immediately. He pointed out that a push happens on almost every single corner kick in professional football. It is the accepted physical reality of the sport. Yet that completely standard interaction was forensically reviewed and harshly punished. Meanwhile, a highly unusual mid-air collision with stadium infrastructure was completely ignored. No review was initiated. No monitor was ever checked. The referee simply waved play on. One end of the pitch got a high-powered microscope. The other end got a blindfold. How can any manager operate under these conditions? Solbakken stood on the touchline, watching a system scrutinize his team with surgical precision, while completely ignoring a glaring anomaly that directly benefited his opponent. The gap between what the authorities promise and what they actually deliver is a massive abyss. They promise a fair and perfectly balanced playing field. They deliver a chaotic digital lottery. Every time the whistle blows, nobody in the stadium knows when the machine will be switched on and when it will be conveniently ignored. A system you cannot predict is a system you can never trust. And trust is the absolute only currency that matters when the stakes are this high. It is incredibly easy to look at this absolute mess and scream about a rigged game. It is the natural human reaction to assume that a massive institution actively wanted the global commercial power of England to advance to the semifinals. The internet immediately flooded with wild accusations. If that cable incident had benefited another smaller nation, half the world would currently be arguing that the governing body hung the wire there on purpose. People desperately want to believe in a grand master plan because a master plan implies that someone is actually in charge. But the truth about that night in Miami is actually far more embarrassing for the people running the sport. This was not a carefully orchestrated plot against Norway. The reality is that the governing body cannot even run its own officiating consistently enough to rig a match. If you truly believe the system was designed to protect England, you have to intentionally ignore a massive piece of evidence from the closing stages of the exact same game. Late in the match, England was exhausted. They were desperately hanging on against a relentless Norwegian attack. Jude Spence made a run into the penalty area and went down under a hard challenge from Oscar Bob. The initial reaction from the referee was definitive. He pointed directly to the penalty spot. It was the perfect opportunity for England to seal the match and entirely avoid the physical torture of extra time. If the system was truly rigged to protect the commercial giants, the video assistant referee would have simply stayed silent. They would have cleared the check and let the penalty stand. Instead, they forced the referee to the monitor. They made him reverse his own decision. They took away a massive advantage from the team everyone claimed they were actively protecting. This single moment completely shatters the conspiracy theory. And this sudden pivot is exactly what makes the situation so utterly depressing for Solbakken. He was not defeated by a dark room of corrupt officials plotting his downfall. He was defeated by pure, unadulterated incompetence. He was beaten by a system that blindly throws decisions at the wall to see what sticks. The officials made a string of highly debatable calls that scattered in completely different directions. The machine is not malicious. It is simply broken. And we must honestly acknowledge the human brilliance that thrived in this chaos. While the officials were losing control of the environment, Jude Bellingham was imposing his absolute will on the match. When the ball fell to him after the fatal error by Orjan Nyland in extra time, the pressure was immense. He was carrying the heavy weight of a nation that expects a trophy every single tournament. But he slammed the ball home with the absolute coldness of a veteran. His 2 goals against Norway meant he secured 2 separate multi-goal games in a single World Cup knockout stage. He became the first player from his nation to ever accomplish that specific historical feat. That strike was his 6th goal of this World Cup and his 7th in the competition overall. At just 23 years of age, he officially moved past Jeff Hurst in the national record books. He tied the single tournament record held by Gary Lineker and Harry Kane. Bellingham did exactly what true superstars are supposed to do when the system around them completely falls apart. None of this takes a single thing away from his greatness, but it highlights the bitter tragedy of the Norwegian perspective. Solbakken and his players were simply collateral damage in a violent clash between human brilliance and institutional failure. Norway did not lose to a grand conspiracy. They lost to a great player, a single goalkeeping error, and an officiating framework so wildly inconsistent that it cannot even be relied upon to make the same mistake twice. The governing body has created a monster it no longer understands. The illusion of absolute control has trapped everyone inside a chaotic experiment where the rules actively change depending on which camera angle is selected. This brings us to the core problem tearing the modern game apart. When a massive bureaucracy hides behind technology, it strips the raw humanity out of the sport. It forces brilliant men like Solbakken to doubt their own eyes. It forces passionate fans to wait agonizing minutes for a digital verdict before they can celebrate a genuine human achievement. I want to know exactly where you stand on this massive shift in the sport. Do you believe this level of unpredictable chaos is just the new normal we have to accept? Or is this the definitive proof that relying on microchips has fundamentally broken the game? Tell me your thoughts below, because the line between technology helping the sport and destroying its credibility has never been this blurred. There is a much larger pattern at play here, and the historical context makes this disaster even worse. If the controversial events in Miami represented just one strange night of football, we could perhaps move on and accept the result as a tragic accident of the sport. But the disaster in Miami is actually just the final domino falling in a truly disastrous summer for the credibility of the governing body. They built a billion-dollar technological fortress around the pitch and completely forgot to hire competent guards to run the machinery. When you look at the wider historical context of this current tournament, the true scale of the institutional failure becomes terrifyingly clear. The digital system did not just fail Stale Solbakken on one isolated afternoon. The entire officiating framework has been failing continuously for weeks on the biggest global stage. Consider the sheer volume of evidence stacking up against the sporting authorities. Alongside the chaos we just witnessed in Miami, we saw the highly controversial red card shown to Balogun magically wiped away after a mysterious phone call from the executives. Alongside that specific incident, we saw the formal complaint filed by the footballing nation of Egypt as they openly accused the officials of blatant injustice on the pitch. Alongside those growing scandals, we watched the brutal dismissal of Embolo that completely killed the emotional night for the team of Switzerland. Every single week, a brand new crisis erupts on the field because the people operating the machines simply cannot maintain a consistent standard of judgment. The governing body is desperate to maintain the illusion of absolute control over the game, but the entire footballing world can plainly see the digital foundation crumbling beneath their feet. When the camera cable saga landed heavily on top of this massive pile of institutional failures, the fans did not reach for the excuse of bad luck. They reached for pure anger. They recognized a clear and highly dangerous pattern of incompetence dressed up as mathematical precision. You can see this exact sentiment perfectly captured in the public reaction from the father of Erling Haaland. Alfie Haaland posted a highly pointed public message sarcastically congratulating Bellingham and the referee for the result. That short message is the ultimate and defining verdict on the reputation the governing body has painstakingly built this summer. They earned every single bit of that public distrust. Nobody handed it to them unfairly. When you sell the world a completely flawless machine and consistently deliver a digital coin flip, even your legally defensible decisions are met with profound suspicion. The system is so deeply broken that even when the authorities might accidentally make the correct call, nobody in the stadium believes them anymore. The authority of the human referee has been entirely replaced by the silent authority of the algorithm, and that algorithm is currently failing the sport. This brings us directly back to the searing heat of that Miami afternoon and the completely divergent paths of two very different nations. On Wednesday, Jude Bellingham will step onto the grass in Atlanta to face Argentina in a massive semi-final clash. He will carry the heavy weight of a national dream stretching all the way back to 1966. But he will also carry the heavy legs of a squad that completely lost control of a quarterfinal match they should have managed easily. England survived the chaos of the system, but the tactical cracks in their armor are now visible for the entire world to see. Meanwhile, the resilient team of Norway is currently on a long flight back home. They leave behind the greatest tournament run in their entire national history, a maiden quarterfinal appearance built almost entirely on the historic goals of Erling Haaland. But there is a deeply cruel and tragic footnote to their sudden exit. Haaland was the absolute sensation of this entire tournament. He scored well over half the goals for his nation to drag them to this prestigious stage against all odds. Yet in the biggest match of his entire life, the officiating system and the opposition defense completely starved him out of the narrative. He finished the game completely anonymous. He registered the fewest touches of any single player on the pitch, literally recording fewer than half as many touches as his own goalkeeper. He was crowded out, physically isolated, and eventually taken off injured during the brutal final minutes of extra time. For a tournament that finally announced Norway as a true global force, it was an incredibly quiet and aching way for the journey to end. This is the tragic reality of the modern game we are all watching unfold. We are watching the raw human element of the sport being slowly suffocated by a massive bureaucracy that completely refuses to admit its own fatal flaws. The governing body now faces the exact same moral question they have cowardly ducked all summer long. What is the actual point of building the most advanced officiating technology in human history if nobody can trust the people deciding when to actually use it? When a sport demands that you trust a lifeless line of code instead of the physical evidence right in front of your own eyes, it does not become more perfect. It simply loses its soul. So you have to ask yourself what your own eyes are telling you about the dark direction this sport is heading. If you want to truly understand how power operates behind the scenes of world football, stay with us as this tournament continues to unfold. Follow the channel, because this is not just a single sporting event. This is a defining moment for the future of the game.